Today's webinar, The Forthcoming of Social and Semantic Technical Documentation with presenter Fabrice Lacroix with Fluid Topics. Welcome, Fabrice.
I have to unmute myself. Thank you, Trish. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for the introduction. So let me share my screen, which is probably the most complex part of the day for me. Change presenter. I think I have to make me the presenter first. Okay, so I think it's good if I do share my screen. How would that work? Okay, no, it does not work. Change presenter. That is the most complex part. I told you. Okay, I am not a presenter, and you're going to see my second screen. Show my screen. Looks to be okay.
Yay.
Perfect. Can we go? So, as Trish said, so I'm Fabrice Lacroix. I'll be your host today. I am the founder and CEO of Fluid Topics. So we are the leading content delivery platform for TechDoc. And if you don't know what a content delivery platform is, it's basically a software solution that is designed to combine any content that you have around your product, transform that content, create a unified repository, fine-grained, enriched, and serve that content to any touch point, make that content accessible to your user through any touch point that you have. Whether you want to build a TechDoc portal, context-sensitive help, augmented reality devices, your help desk tool, so anywhere that content is required to create a better user experience, that content will be delivered from Fluid Topics. So that's the idea. So in this presentation today, we're going to talk about three things. So first, we're not going to talk about generative AI, not today. I know it's a trendy subject, but it's almost from the past now. So we are trying to talk about the future, and which means first, to understand the future, we're going to talk about how the web evolved, then see what it could be applied to TechDoc, meaning social TechDoc and semantic TechDoc. So first part is how did the web evolve? So looking back in the past few years, 20 years. So back in the 90s, before the web arrived, there was the internet only. So no web, just the internet. And if you were looking for information, you had to use tools like those you see on the screen. So I don't know if those names rings a bell, like UCP, Usenet, Archie, Gopher. So it was all between 1970, 1980, 1990. Gopher is 1991. So those were the tools of that time. And all those protocols and systems have one thing in common. They all disappeared suddenly, like dinosaurs wiped out by a meteor. And they were all killed by the web. So the World Wide Web was invented in 1999 by Berners-Lee working at CERN, and Berners-Lee designed a solution for information management, writing, publishing, accessing content. So very much what we do, technical information, very much what the challenge that we have with TechDoc. So that was the scope of designing the web, was initially to solve this problem with technical information. So he wrote that paper that you see on the left, and his boss, Mike Sandel, wrote Vague but Exciting. And so he said to Team Berners-Lee, okay, keep doing it. So Berners-Lee worked with a small team from 1990 to 1992 to implement the first version of the web. So the principle of the web was very simple. It says, okay, it needs to be a decentralized system, meaning there's no one computer, but any computer can be part of that to publish information, deliver information. It has to be universal information, not only just text, it could be images, videos, and so forth. Remember, we're in 1990. And hypertext for linking and navigating across different documents. And the stack designed for that is very simple, but yet very versatile and still in use today, which is pretty amazing, thinking that it was designed now 30 years ago. So it's HTML, that's the format of the content itself, URL for naming things, giving a name to those documents, and HTTP is a protocol for retrieving those documents. So you can say that in 1994, that's starts the first era of the web. So we can call that Web 1.0. And it's mostly about content reading. It's a vast collection of static content, static sites, and read-only pages. It's written by humans, meant to be read by humans. So typical names of that time, may ring a bell, Netscape, Yahoo, Alta Vista was the web search of that time. Not even Google was not existing at that time. Google was created way later, 1999, 1998. So MSN as well. So that's the first era of the web that goes from 1994 to 2002. The first major transformation arrived in 2002 with what we call the rise of the social web, also named Web 2.0. So the transformation itself is the web becoming less one way. One way meaning few write, many read, and then the web evolves to something that is more an interactive platform where anyone becomes a contributor. So that's the beginning of blogs, forums, and user-generated content communities. So names relating to that, brands are Twitter, LinkedIn 2002, Facebook 2004, Twitter is 2006, Instagram 2010, and more recently TikTok 2016. So it's all those tools that relate to having a more collaborative web platform. So again, this slide, I want to highlight the difference because it's very important that you get a clear picture of this transformation, understanding of this transformation. In the Web 1.0, it's only about static content, and the users are just passive consumers outside of the game. And the transformation with Web 2.0 is when the users become more than spectators. They become actors. They are part of the game because now they write the content as well, and they become part of this ecosystem of content, active players. So that's the first transformation. The second transformation came another 10 years later. It was spawned by Berners-Lee again. He wrote earlier in 2001 a seminal article in Scientific American, and the title was very simple. It was The Semantic Web. And the article describes, not technical, it's more a vision. So this article describes how computer could solve complex problems by consulting and consuming remote distributed sources of information. So exactly like humans do when you want to solve something difficult, like you want to organize a trip or vacation trip, you have to go on one site to book a flight, then find the hotels, then find accommodation, and then what you're going to do, museums to visit. So you have to go to probably 2, 10, 15 sites, and then articulate all the information that you find to make something that makes sense. And that's exactly what Berners-Lee wanted to automate and say, if we can have computers going automatically to those websites, sources of information, and connect the information so that it can solve more complex problems by articulating information together. So it's like the web becomes then a medium for the machines to share knowledge and solve complex problems. So that's the vision behind the semantic web, the Web 3.0. So what is interesting, Berners-Lee kept the same foundational stack, tech stack, and increased it by adding new layers on top of. So it's still HTML, HTTP, URLs, and then he added to that languages for computers to talk to each other, and a query language called Sparkle so that computers could query each other and ask for information. So what you see here is what is called the semantic web stack, which is this additional layer of technology on top of the foundation. What is very important here, the core idea to understand is that you don't duplicate information. It's not like you create a web for the humans and a web for the machines. It's really having when you hold a source of information, when you have a database of something, you make the same content accessible to both humans and computers at the same time from the same source. It's not like duplicating, it's really talking two languages. It's making computers talking two languages, talking both HTML and RDF, depending on who they are talking to. Just like you would speak French or English, and depending who you talk to, you switch languages. basically the same. So it's same, one brain, two languages. So information for humans and for computers at the same time. And one of the main things, for those of you that haven't heard about this semantic web, one of the main thing that semantic web enable is what is called linked open data, which is a collection of websites exposing their knowledge according to the semantic web protocol. So it's starting in May 2007. So you see here the first websites like GeoNames, DBpedia, so which is a structured version of Wikipedia, exposing their content, and those data sources pointing to each other and linking information. And that linked open data web grew. So that's the number of sites, so July 2009. And you can see different types of resources were exposed this way: library resources, social, multimedia, statistical, a lot of medical and biological resources and information were exposed that way. It was instrumental in solving at that time the DNA sequencing. That's how many labs and people were, organizations were exchanging information about DNA sequencing at that time. So it grew like that. And you see September 2011, April 2018, so now thousands and thousands of websites, so to say, websites for computers that are making their content, their knowledge, their information available to computers through these protocols. So this is, long story short, this is how the web evolved. So web 1, static content, just the content, and users are outside of the ring, just passive consumers. Web 2 is when the users themselves become contributors and are part of this network. And the Web 3 is when the machine themselves become as well consumers and not just the support infrastructure. So that's the evolution of the web from more technical and visionary perspective. So that was that happened over the past 30 years. So let's look at how TechDoc evolved in the meantime. So basically, I think we can sum up 50 years of evolution of TechDoc with one slide. So first, the format used to be paper documentation, printed documentation, binders. Then this was dematerialized and turned into PDFs, same books, but 0 and 1s, no paper anymore. And then at some point, PDFs became, for some of you, static HTML, so turned into being HTML and HTML websites. And from a delivery perspective, well, that's pretty easy. Used to be binders put in the boxes, PDFs were at the beginning put on CD-ROMs, USB keys, or FTP servers, and HTML on website, or PDF on website as well, but you have the idea here. What is interesting is that we still see companies generating PDFs and putting the PDFs on CD-ROMs and the CD-ROM in the boxes. And we even know companies that are generating HTML, putting this HTML on packages of static HTML that they ship with the product, so to say, whether it's CD-ROMs or in zip files that you don't know, but they are still shipping the content. So that's pretty much what happened over the past 50 years. So now, based on what we've seen here, with how the web evolved from being 1.0 to 2.0, 3.0, what would that mean doing the same with technical documentation? What would be TechDoc 2.0, social TechDoc? What would be TechDoc 3.0, semantic TechDoc? Because you have understood that what we do today is static content, whether it's PDF or HTML on the web. Mostly we do like the web 1.0, static content, few writes, many read as it is. So we do web 1.0 with TechDoc. We are TechDoc 1.0. So what would that be applying the same principle of evolution to TechDoc? And how can we imagine social TechDoc and semantic TechDoc? So that's the idea of today's discussion. So first, TechDoc 2.0, social TechDoc. The possibilities are endless. Maybe you have few in mind. But for today's presentation, I will discuss two main scenarios I have in mind. So the first one, I call it one-to-few. So the idea with this one-to-few scenario is the following. So imagine a user that wants to, so someone that consumes your content, that wants to adapt reuse, comment this content that you provide, this tech that you provide, so that they can put their own information, knowledge on top of and pass it over to someone else. Typical use case would be a field technician using a maintenance guide to service a complex piece of machinery, and while maintaining that device wants to take notes on I did this last time, fix it that way, blah, 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 and then say I want to take that, keep that, and make it available to the technician that will come the next time to service this very particular piece of hardware. So typical use case. So something that content that you adapt, reuse, comment, enhance, and that you share with a limited group of known people. That's a very simple use case, I think. So how does that work today? If your content is static, whether it's PDF or static HTML, and just display this sort of read-only mode on a website, even if it's a website, well, that user will be forced to copy-paste content or work outside of your delivery platform, your website, your doc website, your delivery solution. They will tend to recreate Word files. Then they can, in those Word files, add information and send them by email to other users. You see what I mean? So start of branching your content so that they can use this content the way they see fit to match their use case. We understand it's bad. I mean, it's complex to do, maybe frustrating, and it's branching of content, copy, paste, which is always dangerous. So the question is, how do you empower your users to solve this situation? One way to look at this problem to help you, that helped me a lot thinking about this use case, I came to my mind this comparison between Dropbox Photo and Instagram. What is the difference between Dropbox Photo or Google Photo and Instagram? Because if you look at it, it's the same. Some way the core material, the raw material, are pictures that you take, that you make available. But in one case with Dropbox Photo, it's static, read-only, bunch of content, more like you put your HTML or you put your PDFs and people can just come to this Dropbox Photo, click the picture they want to get, download them, and get a copy on their computer. While on Instagram, it's about the user experience, the interaction, the fact that you have a community of users around you, groups of friends, and then they start commenting, liking, and they engage with your content and they communicate with you. So you see there's a huge difference because basically initially the raw material is the same. Those are pictures that you take, but depending on the way you make them available on the platform that you use, you create things that are absolutely totally different. I think in some way we should start looking at TechDoc. That's a way of looking at TechDoc, is that it's not just about the content. It's about the user experience that we could provide by not just considering the content itself, but the application that makes that content available, accessible to your users. Okay, so it's about, I think, a supporting application, an ecosystem of something where you have what you see here, the corporate content, which is your core content that you write, and then start providing around this content capabilities for users to engage, interact with your content, and at some point even start generating content. You can start feedbacking, commenting this content, adding comments that they can share together, and we'll see if we can go further than that. But to make that accessible, available, come to life, we need an application that is meant for that, which is sort of an Instagram of technical documentation that you can provide to your users. So that's the first scenario. It's one to few, and now you can support a new user experience for people to collaborate around your content, reusing your content by not just generating content and putting content on the web, but by considering that what you need is an application that supports the use case. The second scenario, I call it one to many. So it's not one to few, it's one to many. So let's look at it that way. Who writes? How do you create content? So in the classical paradigm, in TechDoc creation, you have a team of tech writers that are normally supposed to interview people, experts, they need to understand every part of the product, and then they start drafting the manuals, and they have those manuals, this content being reviewed by experts for accuracy, and then they can publish. Okay, so create the content, make content, have people review the content, publish. And if you want to scale up, meaning write more content, go faster, you have to hire more tech writers to do more of the same. So it's like the scale-up model, more of the same. That's one model. Another way of increasing your writing throughput is by changing the paradigm. You still have your tech writing team that can design the storytelling, and then instead of having the tech writers writing the content, they ask the SMEs to write it, and then in the tools that they want, no matter what. And then the tech writing team is just in charge of reviewing the content, proofreading, aligning content to ensure consistency, and then publish that content. So that's another paradigm where the tech writers become more editors, copywriters. It's a scale-out model, because in that model, everybody in the company can become a content producer. And by the way, even though it's not about today about generative AI, that's a typical model where generative AI will be of great help, because these SMEs can start writing their content badly, you see what I mean? And instead of sending you this, sending back to the tech writing team just sort of a bullet points badly written, they could use Gen AI to say, okay, this is, make it nice. Those are the key points, make it nice content, write it for me. Then you could imagine that they iterate on their own on this, starting writing, having generative AI, helping them write, and then they would send back to the tech writing team something that is more refined, that's just raw content. So it would make change a bit the process, but that's still the same idea of having the subject matter experts write the content to increase the writing throughput. So that's interesting. That's an interesting concept. But in that model, you see that the company still maintains a tight control over the process, because it engages only a limited number of people that are internal people. So you're still tightly controlling what's happening there. But remember, in the Web 2.0, everyone can be a contributor, not just a limited group of people that you know. So the question becomes, Tech Doc 2.0 in that respect would be, let anyone write. Imagine that in that paradigm, partners, resellers, customers, end users, anyone that is using your products, selling your products, could become a technical writer and produce content and publish content in your platform, part of this content. Well, that's a bit frightening, I know, but and what we've seen with our own customers is that they have developed an expertise about our product, and our own customers, because Topics is a very open platform, they do things that even ourselves we haven't imagined. They are solving problems in very creative ways. They've pushed the boundaries of the product, developed new use cases, and in fact, this is exactly what our other clients would like to learn. So, oh my God, this is how this company is using Free Topics and did it that way. Wow, that's super cool. And those are things that probably we don't document ourselves because we haven't even imagined that. And that's where that could become beneficial to let our customers start publishing and enhancing our own content. So how do companies usually do that nowadays? But basically, they do it by creating something that is separate from the Tech Doc, which is a community portal or forums. So this is one of our customers here, and you see that they have this Visa developer community. Usually, they use a forum tool or something like that is managed by the company. And by the way, if you don't do that, this can be existing out of your control. Look at Stack Overflow, for example, which is a major community site for developers where they start exchanging tips and how-tos on how to use different pieces of technology. And usually it happens because probably there was no supporting environment for the users to do that was provided and managed by the company. So you provide that, and that's an approach. But if you look at it, and I checked many community websites like that, it's not just this one, but really, if you look at what happens here, is that most of the time you see threads of discussions where you have one customer coming, asking for something quite technical. So I'm trying to achieve this, I'm trying to do that, I have this problem, blah, blah, blah. And then you have some people replying. You see here 5 replies. But what you see is that if you look at all those discussions, they lack context. It's very difficult to know if and how they're applicable to your use case. If you come later there and try to find for information, say, oh my God, that was 2 years ago. Is it still valid? Is it still something that is it still existing in the product so far? So the discussions are very transient. They don't have a long-lasting value, which is one of the problems. Which means as well that if you go to those websites and start running a search to see if anyone has discussed this same problem that you have, or same way of using the product you want to have imagined, and you start asking, searching, and you see tens, hundreds of replies, messages. They all look the same, and they go from being a year ago, a few months ago, a few weeks ago, 10 years ago, and you don't know really what applies to you. And basically, you start reopening a thread and asking the same question over and over again. So that's one of the key problems with those platforms. So the problem here is the disconnect between the content, which is the tech doc and the reference material, which is what exists in the product, and those discussions. So now imagine what it would be merging those two, the sort of community platform and the tech doc website, so that at some point, those discussions would not be happening somewhere else, but grounded, linked to your content. So that basically when people start discussing, it's not like just putting a thread somewhere, but to say, oh, by the way, I'm about configuring this part of the product or using that feature. I have these, do you have IDs, or I have code samples, use cases. So imagine that the doc itself becomes not just the doc, but as well the place that organizes and starts structuring those discussions from users. So that's an interesting approach as well that we could envision. But again, here what I described, it's still the doc exists, and you offer your users the opportunity to collaborate or ask questions and have threads in parallel to the documentation, but that's still not writing the documentation. And you remember in the paradigm of 2.0, it's anyone can write the doc. So what if you would let not just people comment and discuss around the content, but write the content itself? You are going to object that it's impossible. The problem of quality, validity, truthfulness, risk, nobody would do that. It's never going to work. You're going to say that. Many people are going to argue it's never going to work. Well, I don't think so. I think we have examples here. So you remember that encyclopedias years ago. So there were 2 major leaders who were like Encyclopedia Britannica and Encyclopedia Universalis, for example. And that was exactly that. Knowledge written by few, read by many, top-down knowledge. And it has been all those encyclopedias disappeared. They already disappeared for real. They're all closed, bankrupt. They were replaced by Wikipedia, which is written by many, collaborative, social. And it has proven to be, and I say it has proven, really, scholar studies, lots of scientific articles, a lot of studies you can find that easily on the web, has proven that Wikipedia is as reliable and far more complete than those encyclopedias used to be. So the idea of having a large number of people writing content, collaborating for generating and producing knowledge is not working. I think should be reassessed, because we have proofs that it could work. So And I think that we have an even better opportunity here because we are in a B2B environment. We are in a B2B context. So if you fear that by applying this idea of letting anyone write content and produce content that exists on your platform, I think here we have a very, very favorable situation. First, you know your customers, or you can force them to log in first and log in with using their business emails and so forth. So they are known, and we know that when people are known, they are identified, they behave. Second, you could make end-user content, end-user generated content, written content clearly tagged so that other readers know it's not provided by the company, but it's provided by the community. That could be a way to go. You could do progressive visibility, meaning if someone, an end user, a user writes something and publishes something onto your platform, your delivery platform, at the beginning, it could be accessible only to few people from his own company. We are back to the one-to-few scenario. Or you could review that content. Someone would say, oh, I'd like to make that content publicly available because I think there is value for anyone. So that could be first reviewed by you before being visible by anyone. Or that could be as well reviewed by any other users. So this idea of the wisdom of the crowd, where external people could review that content. You have experts. You could have as well the crowd rating that content at any time, say, no, it's invalid, it's not true, I tried, it's not working, and start using this sort of rating system to hide or show this, this user-generated content. You could as well surface or promote people that are automatically show content that is written by trusted users. I mean, if you start reviewing this content at the beginning, and then you say, okay, when Bob writes or Fabrice writes, wants to publish content to my platform, it's good, it's good, it's good, it has been good 10 times, so let's make it automatic now to show that content to anyone. So sort of this sort of a group of trusted contributors. And that starts triggering the idea that you could reward people as well, give them badges and so forth, and we enter the gamification, or everything around the gamification principles to encourage people to contribute and so forth. You see, there are tons of ways to apply this principle of opening content publishing, content writing to more than your internal text writing team or your SMEs, but by letting your customers contribute. And I think there's an opportunity there that needs to be explored. But again, I know it's a social tech doc is a very frightening opportunity thing, but I think it's an amazing opportunity, really. But it will work only if you have the right tool for supporting that. I mean, back to the one-to-few and this idea of having an Instagram, it's more Instagram at scale, dedicated to tech doc, where it's not about wiki, because you need things that are more sophisticated for tech content publishing, but really having a CDP, a content-heavy platform that not only lets you publish and make findable, easily readable any type of content, distribute that content to any touch point, but as well provide the features, the capabilities so that your users can start reusing content, commenting, sharing, and at some point writing as well, and writing content that they can make available to anyone. So you need a platform for that. You need an application for that. So that was just so that was the idea of the discussion about TechDoc 2.0. It's like start thinking about how we can engage our users so that they become part of this capability of writing, enriching, maintaining your body of knowledge and all the documentation that you have around your products. Now, you remember the second major evolution of the web was semantic web. So what would that be? Applying the same principle to TechDoc, which would be then semantic TechDoc or TechDoc 3.0 I prefer, because now semantic TechDoc may have another meaning to you. So remember what I explained earlier. The main thing that the semantic web enabled is that was linked open data and machines communicating directly between each other to access content, read content, and reuse that content with the core idea that you don't duplicate any information. You have one central repository, and then depending on who a human or a machine talks to the data source, you speak to different languages. I will try to illustrate that because if you're not familiar, that may sound a bit weird or difficult to touch to understand. And I have a good example here. We have been providing the technology we are still providing the technology for what is a leading digital humanities database, many languages, started with French-speaking languages, so scientific articles, scholar articles. So this is like about 12 million document theses and scientific articles around digital humanities in now many languages. So it's called easydoor.science. And you see the two screenshots here. When you go to easydoor.science, on the left side, that I don't know if that's changed since I made the screenshot, but that's the home page of the website. And it's for humans. You see there's text and there's a search box, and you can start running a search, looking for scientific articles. And you see as well at the bottom here, it says Vocabularies API Sparkle. So it means that the computers, there's somewhere where computers can ask questions as well. There is what is called a Sparkle endpoint, which is basically another part of the system that is able to talk directly from computer to computer. So let's take an example. If you go to easydoor.science, you run a search as a human, and here my search is cryptocurrency. Got a search result list of articles and theses and scientific papers, and I can click on this list. I can use filters to narrow down my search, and at some point when I find something that is of interest to me, I click on a link, and I am presented with the details of one of those articles here, so the abstract and so forth. So very simple use case, you're used to that. That's for a human. The same for a computer would look like that. It's very simple. You see, the computer would come to easydoor.science, run a search query. So you see here, this query is in Sparkle. So you say, okay, give me all the documents of type, well, there's no type, particular type, and says the title contain bitcoins. Yes, type is filter article or thesis. Okay, so give me all the articles and the theses that you have where the title contains bitcoin. So that's a search query. Oops, sorry. Then you see the reply, and so easydoor replies because you're a computer. You talk Sparkle, so the computer will reply in Sparkle, in RDF, Sparkle, so it looks like JSON. So you say, okay, those are the results. So you see, and it gives you a list of results, and for each result, you can ask the details. The very same way that as a user, you clicked on the link that opened the details of this article page. So it's okay, now that I found this looks interesting to me, like this first document 10670, and then say, okay, give me the title, the last name, the full name, the first name of the author, blah, 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 for this document. And the same way, Sparkle query, and the computer sends back the details, title, last name, blah, blah, blah. Again, it's not it's an API, Sparkle, but it's not just an API because it's not, the language is universal. It's not like when you design an API on your software, and the API on fluid topics may not be the API that you have on your software. We have different routes, different parameters. So you have to code. So if I want to speak to with your APIs of your product, I have to learn your language because you have created a language which is your API. In the case of the semantic web, there's no specific API. It's a universal language that computers can talk to each other without having to learn the API of the other system. So that's as well the difference here. But you see that's how computer talks on the semantic web, the Web 3.0. So now that we have a better understanding of that, let's take that use case. There's a plant with tens of assembly lines, hundreds of machines, okay, from different providers. And you have to maintain that plant and repair and service the machine so that it runs 24/7. So you have technicians that are on duty 24/7 to make sure that everything runs fine, or fix the machines, service the machines, do the maintenance tasks. So how are they going to work? Because you have machines coming from, again, lots of different providers. So option one, so you remember you have received the machine, inside the box there was a binder, something like that. So you take this dock, whether it's a binder or, and you put the binders in a cabinet, or you receive the PDF, you print the PDF, create the binders, and you store them and forget them in a cabinet. Option two, you gather the PDFs from the vendor. Even though you receive the binder, you ask for the PDF and you put them somewhere on a shared drive inside your company, and you can tell to your technicians, this is where the dock is, whether it's physical or digital. Option three, you do nothing. And when the technician has to fix a machine, then they have to go to the vendor's TechDoc portal and find the dock. Okay? So in all two cases, whether it's physical, digital, because you have gathered the dock, or you have the technicians to go on the web and find the dock, they always need to find the dock, okay? In your shared drive, on the web, but they are tasked to identifying the machines that they have, find the document, open the document, and read the doc that way. There's another way of doing that. Now imagine that your technician has a maintenance app that has no content at all, just a maintenance app that you have put, I don't know, tags or QR codes or something like that on all those devices that you have acquired and installed in your facility. And as a technician, I arrive, I'm in front of the machine I have to service. I scan that code, and this app queries small database that you have created where you say, for this QR code, this is this machine, and you just give the, I don't know, description of the machine, the name, the type, so you see that that's sort of a bit of material of that device or that assembly line that you have created. So it's made of this machine, there's a conveyor belt of type B43 from that vendor, there's an ending robot we have added, which is model XZ3 from this other vendor, blah, blah, blah. So you have just described this somewhere. And meaning that the reply from this database that you have internally, where you describe all your machines that you have, is sent back to this app. So this app knows now, the user knows now what is in front of, and the app then goes to the web, computer to computer, and start querying through with the principle of the semantic web 3.0, the TechDoc servers speaking Sparkle from those vendors that send back the information, okay, and then start assembling dynamically the info that you need for maintaining service that machine. So you see the difference here is that, again, you don't start duplicating the content, getting that content from the vendor, storing that on your own servers and making that difficult to read, but you leverage the fact that computers can host and make that content available, preferably fine-grained, and that dynamically this content is retrieved by, and just the pieces that you need, by those machines, your app with an intermediate server and the servers of the vendors where they maintain the doc and they make that content available at any time. So that would be the idea probably of what Semantic TechDoc 3.0 would be, is like you as a vendor of one of those machines, you would make your content accessible not only to humans the way you do today, dynamic HTML preferably, if not still a bit of PDF or static HTML, but you make that content available to users, to humans in a readable form. And at the same time, imagine that your tech stack knows how to Sparkle, RDF Sparkle, talks those languages, and allows other computers, other systems to retrieve this content speaking the Sparkle language, so that as a consumer, whether I'm an app, I'm a machine, I can just pull that content and create on the fly specific targeted content for the technicians. So that would be the idea here. Now you could even imagine going a step further, which would be mixing the principle of TechDoc 3.0 and TechDoc 2.0, meaning that this content that I, as a user, I am reading may come dynamically from different providers through Sparkle. I can see that, start commenting, interacting, reusing, building my manuals, and probably contributing locally, contributing and sending that content back to those providers by saying, oh, this, you could add this, or I propose that way of fixing the machine as well, and so forth. So you could see that there are tons of possibilities to extend the way we are used to interact, use, provide this content, this TechDoc content. So that's the idea of what I wanted to share with you today. That I strongly believe, and that was one of my, the reason why I imagine we created free topics, and the vision I had years ago was really how 1.0 we are with TechDoc. We are still struggling to find a tool, whether to know if we should write in data or in Markdown or blah, blah. Doing static publishing, putting a bit of search on top, and that's still struggling with the 1.0 model, as opposed, and well, we should start looking differently at TechDoc, because it's a huge opportunity to create communities of engaged users, create loyalty, leverage their knowledge, make them capitalize on the content, make it a tool for their daily work. So I think that's what I wanted to share with you. So keep in mind, TechDoc 2030, it's not about the content itself. It's not about having a website with search and whistles and some nice shiny UI only. It's not just that. It's really about thinking a user experience, about interaction, efficiency, automation, and it's about providing a full-featured environment that supports all those use cases and vision. So, and we strongly believe, and that's our vision, that's our belief, and this is what we work on every day with Free Topics, is enhancing the platform that we bring, that we provide, so that we support those use cases and we help you transition from a very top-down, read-only TechDoc 1.0 model to something that is more open and provides more engaging features for your users. This is it for today. Thank you. So,
that was great.
Do you have questions? We have time for questions. I got one question here. How do you see docs as code as part of it? Well, good question. Doc as code is not, it's another part of the puzzle. Doc as code, I would say, see doc as code is more, I have to go back to slide 1 almost. Here, so doc as code is something that appears here. It's more like upstream, because what we discussed today was mostly downstream. Once you have the content and how you make that content, and if you let the users reuse that content and be another source of content. It's about, taking one of the users here and making the users as well, putting the users as well on the left side, because they are contributors. And doc as code is something that would be on the left side upstream, which is a way of writing, managing your content, making content part of the system, or using different formats, different mixing the code, the product. If you're a software vendor, that's what we do. The doc can be part of the software itself, and when you roll out your software, the doc part of it is extracted and published at the same time. So there's tons of tools around that. So we've made the discussion. So it's more, there's nothing that is contradictory between web TechDoc 2.0, TechDoc 3.0, and docs as code. Docs as code is more on the upstream part, how you manage and how you make that, you publish your content. Another question is also with the social docs and QA accompanying topics, it is something you already have implemented. So does it carry? Well, we have started implementing a few of those features in Free Topics. We have feedback, we have rating, we have something that is called personal books. for example, which is the capability for users to reuse your content. So if you write in data structure, that's exactly what you do as a tech writer. You write those pieces of content, and then you arrange them in maps, and you have these fragments of content, those topics, that you can reuse in different manuals, okay? So you reuse content, and that's one of the value of structured content of data. But what you do as a tech writer, we did the same inside free topics downstream at the delivery layer, so that users can do the same, and they can, in few clicks, create their own documents, virtual documents, and start reusing content. They say, I want to create a book for solving a problem, preparing a maintenance task. They say, I need this section, this chapter, this topic. They can rearrange that, put their own comments, write their own topics, and they can create in a few clicks their own documents. So we have that in free topic. We started, and we have now in the roadmap now adding the capability for those users to make those documents that they create available to not just them or few people, but being able to republish them in the platform. So that's part of we already have some features like that, and we are enhancing that. I must say that I'd like to do more and faster, but I see as well that anyway, if we would have all the features available today, I'm not sure many of our customers will use them. So you see what I mean? We try to adapt what we develop and what we put in the platform, and we already have a lot of things like that, so that it matches the use cases and the speed of adoption of our customers. Another question is, how far are we from social technical documentation? Do you know any current examples that are going in this direction, showing that it's happening? Yes, we have customers that do it not through the delivery, well, not exactly that way, and it's more a bit related to Docs as code. We see customers that have data content and as well content in Markdown stored in GitHub. So they got a mix of both data Markdown content, and the content that is in Markdown stored in Git. When it's published, there is a button that says edit in Git, and they let their customers edit this Markdown content in Git, because Markdown is easy. So you don't have a steep learning curve as you have in data. It's very difficult to let any user write and modify data content. They could break your data content. And they start, instead of writing everything in data, that's part of the content in Markdown, and that's the content that they have open for editing to their users. So people have to be connected, authenticated, blah, blah, blah. And when they suggest and make a change in the tech doc, it creates a merge request in GitHub, and then the tech writers can control that, reject, or accept the change request. So yes, we've seen example of that. And one of that customer, you can see because it's public, it's Teradata. So if you go to docs.teradata.com, and the quick starts to Teradata is in Markdown, and you have this editing GitHub button on the doc. So yes, we see that happening, but it's usually for a subset of content, and content that is specifically designed for that, and usually in a format that is less technical, so that it's easier for users to edit that content. And I've seen others like that. Mostly tech vendors usually are more on this thing. Another question. Users prefer product content that comes from the company because they can trust it. Do you think this user-generated content have a negative effect on the product or company's image? Well, as I said, there's a risk. It has to be controlled. I think that can be, you can apply that principle to only a subset of content. You could create a category of content called how-tos, for example, not ref guides. You could say that ref guides and quick starting notes or whatever are only published by the company, and they are stamped company certified, written by us. As you could imagine, having a category of content that you create, you name how-tos, how to do things, tips and tricks or whatever, tool tips, whatever, different formats like that. And those formats only, you could let users write that and contribute to that, because they could share what they do, share their expertise that way. And that could be, again, that could be rendered differently, that could be tagged as provided by anyone, not reviewed yet, not certified, blah, blah, blah. Which is interesting because now we are back to, again, I know that Gen AI and ChatGPT is a very trendy thing. It's like when you use ChatGPT and you start writing content, well, you make ChatGPT generate content for you, you have this problem of, can we trust what ChatGPT has written? We know that ChatGPT can hallucinate, the right perfect phrases, good grammar, but it's a nonsense, it's wrong. Well, you have the same problem with users, in fact. So you are confronted with the same problem of checking and letting users write. Then you as a company will have, if you want to adopt Gen AI, because you have to check the validity of what is generated by AI as generated by humans. So you see, it's not that much different. And probably at some point, are you more willing to trust the user that has been a long-term customer and for which you have reviewed the first 5, 6, 7, 10 articles and say, oh, this is a trusted contributor. Still, it's not company certified because we haven't reviewed that content yet, but it's a trusted contributor, or that comes from an external contributor, and we have reviewed it. We can say, yes, it's right. And thank you, by the way, for contributing. So that's the way I see that, reducing the risk and managing this. Question, by semantic web, do you mean that it relies on a system of metadata? Yes, it's way more than metadata. Semantic, when Berners-Lee crafted in 2001 this idea of semantic web, and again, that's the name of the article. It's not like, so he used this keyword semantic way before it became trendy, because now everything is semantic. So the idea of Berners-Lee, and the reason why Berners-Lee used the keyword semantic for the semantic web, is that when I speak to you, or if you look at that slide, there's tons of hidden semantic, okay? And you can, as a human, you've been trained, your eyes, you are skilled enough to sort of understand that because those 4 blocks of text that you see, ingest, creates, delivers, blah, blah, are related to each other because they are on the same line, okay? So that's implicit, but your brain, same font size, on the same line, your brain knows that there's a hidden semantic here, that this goes together and this goes as sort of one thing to read. But if you look at it, in fact, from a computer perspective, if you were a computer were reading the slide, those are blocks with XY coordinates. It's not that visual. So the semantic of saying this block, this block, this block, and this block, these 4 blocks of content are related and should be read almost as one, is something that you as a human knows, but the computer does not understand. So that's exactly what you do with data. You put semantic in your content. You start saying this is not just any content. Those are 4 paragraphs or 4 items that goes in a list, for example. Or that list is not just any list. It's a list of tasks, so it's a procedure. So that's the idea of the semantic web, is tagging content. It's about tagging content so that it becomes obvious to computers what it's about. And data is, for me, data is semantic, because data brings semantic to your content, to the content, by not just saying it's a paragraph, it's a list, it's an item, it's a task, it's a procedure, it's a task, it's a description. So that's what Berners-Lee meant by semantic, is that you should having tags around the text itself, the content, the information, so that it tells exactly what this is, what this information is exactly about, what type of information is it. So it articulates with metadata as well. So you can tag content and say this piece of information is a procedure and it applies to that hardware, piece of hardware, that piece of machinery in that version, in that revision, blah, blah, blah. So that's the idea of semantic. It's metadata and structure, but structure not in terms of chunking, but structure in terms of tagging, internal tagging of content. And I think many of you here are familiar with data as being in the CIDM organized conference. So you see what I mean by tagging. If you look at data, those procedure steps, or if you do specialization, if you do specialize your content, and you apply a data specialization, it's for adding more semantic to the content. So that's the idea behind semantic in this context of the semantic web. I think that's it. We don't have any other question. I'll give you a few minutes if you do have some. Don't hesitate. Nope. Okay. Well, thank you, Dan, for having joined. Well, and I should the last slide. Don't hesitate to reach out, info@freetopics.com. We'll be happy to present what we do, discuss further your needs. I hope you enjoyed, and that shed a new light on what you could do next with your tech content. So I think we are underestimating and undervaluing what tech can do and how it can be leveraged inside our company. So that's what I wanted to share with you for today. So thank you very much for having attended. Trish, if you want to add something.
That was wonderful. And yes, thank you so much. Very informative. I really enjoyed that. And I'm sure a listener did. Remember that we will have this posted on the CIDM website, the recording, and we will be sending those out. So thank you very much, Fabrice. Very nice.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, Trish, as always. Thank you all. Have a good day. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.